Well, it's getting close to 9 p.m. and the family fireworks, but for one person in particular, the new year is literally minutes away. We've sent Tom Ballard out to the International Dateline, the official line that separates one calendar day from the next, to be one of the first people in the world to experience 2015 as it kicks off.
Very exciting.
Tom, how's it all going?
Hello guys! Hello Australia! I'm currently hovering about 3,000 feet above the Pacific Ocean, just over the International Dateline, where 2015 will be kicking off in just a couple of minutes. It's pretty exciting stuff.
Amazing stuff. So, Tom, what can you see? What's going on around you?
To be honest, guys, it's all pretty black at the moment. What with us, being over the ocean at night time, there is literally a never-ending expanse of blackness. We went past an oil tanker a bit earlier on. That was pretty good.
Good.
But for now, pretty pitch black. Back to you guys at Sydney Harbour. Woo!
Tom Ballard in a helicopter.
In a helicopter.
Better you than me, my lovely. We'll be coming back to him later in the show. Hey, now, are you guys ready for some fireworks? Yeah. It's that time of the evening when you should grab your kids, grab your loved ones, heck, grab a stranger off the street so you can enjoy the first spectacular set of fireworks of the evening.
We have so much coming up tonight after the fireworks, including the 2014 pub quiz,
Yes.
fantastic music, celebrity guests, interviews, comedy, and a look back at the big stories of the year.
Now, look, all the kids come in, all the kids come into the
Come on.
lounge room, come on. A little shout out
you're
to
big-
our little nieces and nephews. Hello, little Julia, Kate, Tom, and Ollie.
April, Ted.
Hi,
All
Megan.
right, go to
Now,
bed.
Shake your legs to wake yourself up.
Don't
That's
fall
your
asleep
arms.
yet.
That's your arms. Don't fall
Shake,
asleep.
shake it. Slap yourself in the face.
Do a dance, slap yourself in the
Slap
face.
someone else in the face.
Slap
Don't
someone
do
else
that,
in the
kids.
face. No,
That's
don't.
terrible advice.
Hold hands and get ready and look up into the sky if you're here
Yeah.
or in your lounge room.
Look straight at
us,
the TV.
Straight at us here in the TV to
Maybe-
get ready to stay awake and not fall asleep.
Turn the music down
Turn
or
the
up.
music down.
Listen to our music,
and this
much
music,
better.
because it's much, much better. And get ready.
Get ready, it's going to get exciting.
It's going to get very exciting. But now,
Ooh.
right now, brought to you by the City of Sydney, the
Family Fireworks!
evening in style, but that, my friends, was merely an amuse-bouche, which of course is French for...
French for
For-
funny bush.
No, it's not.
Shrub.
It's like an appetizer, literally an amusement for your mouth, Toby, like an hors d'oeuvre.
I knew that.
So stick with us tonight because you'll get an even bigger bang at the stroke of midnight.
Blimey.
Strange thing to
Right,
say.
wow. Okay. Now, those fireworks impressed us here, but the world's best and most honest critics are, of course, the children, because they are the future.
Teach them well and let them lead the way. All the beauty. Anyway, so I think
Thank
we
God the
should
ABC.
check in with Scott at Admiralty House to get the kids' reaction to those fireworks. Scott, was that a thumbs up?
Julia, a double thumbs up, but don't take it from me. Let's ask Mahadir, because she told us before, just 20 minutes ago, she'd never seen a fireworks display like before anywhere. So, what did you think?
It was awesome. It was fascinating, and I didn't expect this. It was so good, and it's a great opportunity to be this close in here, and I'm so happy.
Because we're watching it from Admiralty House, the Sydney residence of the Governor-General, so the view was pretty good. And also another student from the Beacon Foundation who was watching and whose eyes lit up not just by the fireworks but with delight was Tahir. Tahir, what did you think?
It was fantastic. I've seen last year, but this year we got the best spot and we got the best view, and it was just amazing.
Last year you were on the other side, weren't you?
Yeah, last year I was under the Harbour Bridge, but suddenly there was rain. We had to move from there because of the rain. And this year I got the best spot, and it was fantastic.
You'll have to ask
Yeah.
the Governor-General, can you come back next year?
Yeah,
Just a
sure.
thought, just a thought.
It would be
And Julia, all 32 of these students are now here, so why don't I ask for a collective response as to what they thought? What did you think of the fireworks?
Excellent.
I think it was a thumbs up.
Yes, that is definitely a thumbs up. Well done. And no rain too this year, which is good. Thank you, Scott. Now let's see how Melbourne's New Year celebrations are shaping up. Dave, in the words of Marvin Gaye, what's going on? This one. What's going on?
Dave?
Oh,
Dave?
the camera
Oh,
fool's
hello
gone rogue.
there.
Here he is. Dave!
How's it going?
Good.
I'm just talking to the kids here. I'm selling barbecue sausages. Here you go, young man. That's $3. That's for the Dave O'Neill Foundation. Thanks very much. Raising money for the ABC. Anyway, we're asking people what their New Year's resolution is here. And I tell you what, there's lots of kids. What's your resolution?
To explore the world.
Explore the world. There we go. How about you, young man? What's your resolution?
To learn more breakdance.
More breakdancing. Can you show us? Come on, here we go. Look at this. Go. Wow, that's... Hey, man. We're like, whoa. I'm DMC. And what about you? What about you, young man, up the back there? What's your resolution? He's a tall man. What's your resolution?
I want to keep on improving my target shooting skills.
Shooting. He wants to improve his shooting skills. Just step back, buddy. Step right back. How about you down there? What's your resolution?
To practice dancing and to become a professional ballerina.
A professional ballerina? That's what I used to do. This is unbelievable. And you, what's yours?
I want to score more than 11 points per basketball game.
So do I. That'd be awesome. And how about you, young man?
My New Year's resolution is to think of a New Year's resolution next year.
New Year's resolution action. Very good. Well, I tell you what, my New Year's resolution is to stop this whole Sydney-Melbourne rivalry. So these kids are down here in Footscray Park. We're missing out on the Harbour Bridge fireworks, aren't we, guys? Yeah, and it's quite sad. So I've made my own Harbour Bridge. Check this out, of sausages. Yeah! Look at that. And do we have any fireworks? Where are the fireworks, guys? Smell that. Smells good, doesn't it? What do you think? Look at that. Oh, beautiful. There we go.
Thank
Live
you.
from Footscray Park. Here they go. Whoa, look at that. Whoa, beautiful. Look at that. Oh, lovely.